So this is a pergola, or pergola, and this is a community center where Hispanic families come and get certain services. They needed a place to sit, so we built this to shade them also, because they would have to just stand outside. So we finally realized, so we had a class, some of our classes did this. But come on in closer. Most pergolas don't have a solid roof over them, so rain can come down, but they're often used in areas where there's not much rain anyway. So they're slatted to let air freely come back and forth, but you have to watch out which way the sun's going. So this sun's over this way, so we put, to allow some sun to come in, we put it this way. But if you wanted to block more sun, you'd put these little things going this way, and the sun, if the sun was over there, it couldn't get through. This is kind of a traditional Spanish and Mexican design. But these are really nice shade things to have in yards and hot areas. So let's go to this one. Any questions about this? This was that summer school class I was telling you about, with the high school kids. We built this.
Did you do all the millwork?
Yeah, we did all the millwork.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a lot of work.
What's the permitting process for this?
No permitting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it a certain size that it's under?
Yeah, and and it's an outside structure. And it's not really a structure where people live in, so it's pretty open. And then this other pergola I want to show you is down here. So we built a pergola at the main campus in the math, what do you call it, the math lab courtyard. If some of you have been down there. We built that one into a sandbox to have the vines go up on the pergola, but I don't think they've followed through with that much. So this is not a Hispanic design, this is a Japanese design or Chinese design. It's actually Japanese. The Chinese discovered this design, but they usually painted it all kinds of multicolors. The Japanese reduced all the color to just basic colors, black, brown. So same shape though. The Japanese put little white tips on it. So we had a class, we actually had a class called Outside Structures, because people wanted it, but we didn't want to make it part of the requirement because we already had enough required classes. First class filled up, but then after that we couldn't get enough students, so we haven't offered it. Maybe we will in the future if we have enough interest to fill a class, but anyway, they built this class, and a class built this structure, and we put carbonate transparent roof panels on it, so you could be under here during the rain. It'd really be nice. That's not very Japanese. This is kind of a hybrid design. The Japanese put big, heavy roofs with tile on it. We didn't want to do that. So I'll just say one thing about this structure is, I designed this, and I've always had an interest in Japanese structures, and I had a book that showed a temple being rebuilt. It's the only book I've ever found, and I kind of got the dimensions of some of these brackets and things, and I thought it was all decorative, but then I saw this thing, which I'll show you later, about a building and a small structure in the Chinese Forbidden City, and where they did a shake test on it, and it turns out these things are anti-earthquake things. They don't have any nails, and all these things are just pegged together. I have nails and fasteners, but in Japan and China they just have pegs, and when the earthquakes hit, everything shakes, but because it's not rigidly connected, it doesn't fall apart. It just rides out the shaking. In fact, this thing in Beijing didn't even have the posts connected to the ground. The structure just kept them, and it would kind of dance around, but it didn't fall down. And they subjected that to the parameters of the worst earthquake in Beijing history, and then they went even further. and this little stupid little structure still stood up. It had little infill walls which crumbled, but the basic frame was there.
Are those small blocks? Are those drilled into the beam below it, or is it like more just in?
No, they're drilled into the beam before. These were any way I could get at it to connect them. But in Japan and China, they're just pegged in different places, and there's no actual connectors other than that. So it's interesting how I don't know how they ever figured that out, but they did.
Was the green and green architecture modeled after Japanese?
Well, a little bit.
I remember
Yes.
learning a bit about
Yeah, that's good observation. Green, a little bit. I think they were actually. No, I think they were contemporary with Frank Lloyd Wright, but he used a lot of his designs were Japanese also. So
Right.
there is that influence.
for horizontal.
Yeah, I wish we could go. There aren't any green and green here. There is a Frank Lloyd Wright house in Montecito.
Oh, yes.
That author, what's his name? One of the authors lives there. But we have to go to LA. Huh?
Was it Boyle?
Yes, but we could go to, we have to go to LA to get, or Pasadena to get the green and green. So I was originally an architecture student, so my study of building techniques is also, connected to architecture. So, and I think that's pretty valuable actually to understand that. So, most countries have a style like China, Japan for this, their ancient style, and it makes a lot of sense for the country, but because America's peopled by so many different people from all over the world, we don't have an architecture that's really indigenous. Even the Native American architecture comes the closest, but they weren't here at the beginning either. They came also, but their architecture, it doesn't lend itself to a lot of buildings, so we don't use many of their designs. Although some we could, some of the mound architecture we could. So we have just styles from all over, and so we choose kind of, randomly. Oh, I like that Mediterranean look. Oh, I like that green, style. And so we have so we're not really geared into the architecture as something that we need for our life to be successful. It's just kind of something that we think is cool. So it's a big difference. That's where our building's really completely different than most places in the world. Most places in the world that have old cultures, like say Italy or France, even though they have new buildings, a lot of times they'll continue those old motifs into the new architecture. So there's a little bit of continuity. But we don't really have that too much. The most we have is, like California, we have the Spanish and Mexican influence, which is great. It makes Santa Barbara really the city it is. And it makes sense here because it was at a time when the people were closer to the land